Hello, and welcome to the journey of grief, becoming us without them. My name is Barbara Field. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in Sacramento, California, and I specialize in treating trauma and addiction and attachment and grief. And I started this channel so there would just be a place for people who are grieving to hear from other people that are grieving, kind of normalize your experience and invite you to just feel free to grieve however you're grieving. And today we're going to be talking about holiday grief because, as anybody who's ever grieved anything knows, the holidays tend to be like gasoline on the fire. And so I'm going to ask each one of you to introduce yourself and tell us what you would like us to know about you. And how about if we start with Harry?
Hi. Can you hear me? Can everybody hear me? Okay. All right. Um, let's see. I live in the Sierra foothills of Northern California, a little town called Colfax. We are the site of the transcontinental railroads coming together. We are definitely a railroad historic town. And I've lived here for almost 40 years. I came from Southern California, the San Fernando Valley, and my children were born in the high desert, Apple Valley, where I worked, and Roy Rogers was one of my customers even. So I had kind of a weird career, and I love living up here, and it was a great place to bring my sons and my then wife. And when they got into the teenage years, that's when all the insanity started. And in let's see, I'm trying to think back when the first my son attempted suicide 3 times, and he was successful on the third. Um, couldn't believe it, still can't believe it. I'm in contact with a lot of his friends still that are now, much older. He was a very handsome young man. We had a celebration of life for him. There were untold amount of people that I never knew that came and spoke about him. Hmm. Hmm. But I had to learn that that was his choice of how to eliminate the pain. And thanks to Barbara, she helped me differentiate a lot of those feelings. But as you can tell, they're still in there, um, but they're manageable now. And Christmas, thanks to my wife, we've been in a relationship for over 20 years and then married 7. She's quite the Christmas gal. She cooks for the neighborhood and we go deliver and she puts her little Santa hat on and she really helps turn the tide in me to make it better. And it is, but there's still those moments when it creeps up on you. And I try not to be Bo humbug. I watch all the Christmas shows to get me back in line. And this year, we're doing something completely different on Christmas. And I'm curious to see how this works for me. Uh, my wife's sister is going through divorce and house sales and all this other crazy insanity down in San Diego, California. And Christy is very much an organizer and can help be a great taskmaster. And so she volunteered to go down there the week of Christmas. So Harry's going to spend his first real Christmas alone. The dog died, the cat died. I mean, we don't even have bird or not hamster, nothing. So it's just going to be me, and it's going to be interesting. So uh, I have a lot of time to process things. I have a lot of opportunity to do different things. And we have new neighbors that now live right next door to me. After my neighbors were my neighbors for 37 years, they moved and passed on and what have you. And we're blessed with some fantastic people. They're just really awesome. And I don't imagine they'll leave me alone. They're we're very good neighbors for each other and watch out for each other in the short time they've been here since April. But I don't know. As I tell people, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy, and I've had some pretty viable enemies. I wouldn't even wish it on them because it's a feeling that you just can't imagine. Uh, my neighbor, the old neighbors that lived there, they had a son who was a drug addict dealer living in a motorhome in the very back of the property. And a couple of years ago, all of a sudden, one summer day, she was screaming at the top of her lungs. And Christy said, Harry, you better get over there. Something's going on. And I went over there and I saw her. And the first words out of her mouth was that she said, Duke is dead. And then she took about 5 more steps and she said, I now know how you feel. So the bond between us became much stronger. There weren't so many Karen moments, as I call it, about our property and this and that, and what have you. All of a sudden, none of that mattered anymore. And we just became really close in that regard.
Well, I'm gonna move on to someone else. We'll come back and talk some more in a little bit. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, Melinda, how about you?
Hi, my name is Melinda, and it's been an eventful year. In May, my father passed away, and then about a week and a half or so later, my divorce was final. So I've been going through a variety of grief. I actually lost a very good mentor of mine of 20 years. Also, a couple of weeks after my divorce was actually the week before my divorce was final, and another family friend, their daughter, their 16-year-old, committed suicide. And then about 3 weeks ago, I had my father's youngest brother passed away as well. So there's been a lot of grief happening. Um, I think for me personally, the biggest impact has been obviously my father and the divorce. Um, but I'm also noticing the impact that is having not just on me, but I'm at a place where I feel like I'm getting a little more grounded and recognizing the impact that it's having on my kids, on my siblings, on my father's special partner for 33 years. And so I'm looking forward to unpacking a little bit of that with you tonight.
Thank you for coming. Judy Ann.
Well, I live a little further northeast than Harry. I live up in the mountains, Lake Almanor, beautiful pine trees, and love being here. I was widowed 15, almost 16 years ago with a husband that I'd been married to for 40 years and met him when I was 12, sort of, not really. I don't like people trying to figure out how old I am. But it was a sickness that he had, a cancer, esophageal cancer, and he died after about 5 months of being really sick. But it was something that we dealt with for about 7 years. And like you, Melinda, I've had a couple of other losses this year. A year ago, I lost one of my dearest friends. But I think that for myself, my life has changed a lot because I got married 10 years ago and I wasn't looking or planning to get married, but I did get married. And so I have another spouse that is my second husband and never planned to have a second husband. So that's kind of changed the course of my life. I professionally am a licensed clinical social worker, a therapist who has done a whole variety of things, from working in psych hospitals with the Department of Defense and private practice, teaching at a university. And right now I'm semi-retired, and I have just very few clients that I see online. I work at a retreat center in Arizona for those in full-time ministry that are having a time of crisis or challenge in their life. And so I work with pastors about 4 times a year. And then my husband and I have a ministry house up here where we are a hospitality house where people come who are in ministry who need to be ministered to. So I have a very full life of things that I do, but it doesn't change the depth or the amount of loss that I experienced years ago. And I was just talking to my husband about this podcast and just about the changes that came into my life as a result of marrying somebody second. And sometimes that is a distraction, but other times there's grief involved with that it's not like it was the first time. I have 4 grown children, 10 grandchildren, 3 stepchildren, and I'm grateful for my life.
So, as I said before, I'm Barbara Field, and my husband died almost 10 years ago. It was January 2016. And so I used to tell people that I thought I was a good grief counselor until my husband died. And now I'm a good grief counselor because, like Harry said, there's just no way to read enough books or take enough classes to fully understand how terrible it feels until it happens to you. And so I'm very grateful for all of you being with me today so we can kind of hopefully invite other people to have a chance to talk about their grief. So, Harry, you wanted us to talk about how the pain can suddenly come back during the holidays, even if it's been a long time or a short time. So say more about that.
Movies, traditional movies really do it. They bring it up, and then I deal with the emotional feelings of it again. And then I'm able to use some of the tools that I've learned from Barbara and other counselors as well to process it. And I've learned that it's okay. It's okay to experience those things. Being a man in our world, we're always taught, to be, pull yourself up by the bootstraps and, all that other stuff. And I've learned that a lot of people are very miserable because they're trying to do that and they're burying a lot of stuff. So when I have other people that are grieving about something, it's kind of a Burma shave sign on the road for me to look at it and go, okay, I used to be that way, and now I'm grateful. I'm grateful to finally acknowledge I have gotten better. But it's a real event that it's almost indescribable when it hits you. And unless you have tools from somebody or something, trying to do it alone is a horrible, horrible experience. So that's when it hits me, I have to jolt myself back into some kind of a current reality and go, wait a minute, well, hold on. And I'm able to get through in that way, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. So, Julianne, how about you? How the holiday slam affects you?
Well, for me, it's been 15 years since I lost my husband. I think one of the things that made it harder for me is that within 2 years, I lost my mom and my dad and my husband. So that was my dad died, and then my mom died like 7 weeks later, and then 2 years later, my husband died. So that was a lot of loss in a very short period of time for me. And I think that time has helped, but I've also done the work. I've gone to grief therapy groups myself, done my own therapy, and I surround myself with a whole group of amazing women who speak into my life and encourage me, which I think makes a huge difference when you've got good support from people that truly care about you and get you and don't try to fix you, but just kind of let you talk about what you're feeling. Barb, what was the question you asked me?
So Carrie wanted us to talk about how you can be doing better and making progress and not noticing the pain so much anymore. And then sometimes the holidays come and it all kind
Yeah.
of fires again.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing about loss in the holidays is that when we have loss with people who are significant in our life, regardless of how we lose them, it changes everything. I mean, if it's a divorce like Melinda's gone through, I mean, without a doubt, Melinda, I am so sure that your Christmases will be different than they were, a few years ago. When you've lost a dad, they're going to be different. When you've lost a son like you, Harry, I mean, it's going to change things. And for me in the beginning, I mean, when I lost all three of the most significant, I would say, figures in my life, my life just changed dramatically. I mean, I became the matriarch of the family, which just happened, and I have 4 kids and grandkids and people who were there for me, but I also needed to be there for them. It changed a lot of traditions that we have. It changed just the way that we celebrated because of just the loss and the pain that's there. And in the very beginning, I think the grief especially can make you so sad that you kind of want to just skip Christmas. You don't even want to be around people because you feel like you have to act like you're happy, and it's kind of a catch-22. I don't want to act like I'm too happy because then they're going to think I don't really miss that person, and I also don't want to act like I'm too sad because then they're going to think I'm not doing well, and it takes a lot of energy to act happy, and if I'm sad, that doesn't feel very good either. So there's a lot of expectations, I think, that we put upon ourselves because we don't really know what other people think of us anyway. We just kind of guess. So I guess wanted to say that during the holidays, after you've lost someone, just expect there's going to be changes, and try to not let it get you down too much. Expect there's going to be challenges. There's going to be people who fall apart. There's going to be people who aren't there for you. You can't believe that they're not calling you or contacting you to check on you because they were there before. People aren't going to say the things that you think they should say, or people are going to say things that you take very personally and it hurts your feelings. I think just expect a challenge, and I don't mean to be a downer, but I think that when our life changes, everything changes, and to expect the challenges and not to fight it so much, maybe just kind of embrace that, what, there's going to be some hard parts that are there. There's going to be some things that are different. What can I do to make this what I need it to be? What can
Julianne,
I
can you give an
plan?
example
What can I maybe step out of that maybe I used to do and I don't want to do? Or maybe I want to go on a trip and not even be around people this year. So I think there's going to be those kinds of challenges that we have choices to make. And it doesn't mean that we can't honor what was before. I think sometimes we feel like, well, if somebody died or somebody left me, even a divorce, that we have to just like not talk about it. But we have good memories, we have good times, we have things that made that person special to us in our family. And I think we need to celebrate them. Often we have a celebration of life, but I think there's nothing like when the holidays come, celebrating and talking about that person that was really important to you and being able to laugh about it, being able to rejoice in the time that you had with them. Yeah. I think that's what I would say. I would say, expect the challenge, that there will be challenges, maybe plan ahead on how you might be able to meet some of those, and maybe look for a way out if it looks like it's going to be too challenging. Lower your expectations of people being there for you because most people are pretty self-centered. And then also be sure to look back and just enjoy what was, even though you don't have it anymore.
And can you give some personal examples of how some of that looked as you were going through it?
Are you talking to me?
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you very well. Personal examples of what it looked like when I was going through
After your husband died, when you were going through it?
Sure.
Like,
Yeah. One of the traditions that we had in my family, well, not my family, in my husband's family, he was Hispanic, was making tamales every year. That was something from the first year that we got married, we made tamales, and then our kids were born, and then they made tamales with us, and then we made a jillion of them, and he would sell them when he worked at the railroad. And I mean, it was a big part of our Christmas. And so after Freddie was gone, tamales is still important. And so the first year, I didn't feel like making tamales. And I think that was okay. I didn't have to make them the first year. I don't even remember if I made them the second or the third year, but there came a time when it's like Christmas is not Christmas without tamales. And so I gathered with friends, I gathered with some of the kids, and we made them. And that was a way of remembering Freddie in my life and his family, and embracing that was an important part of culture and heritage and tradition. In fact, this year, I'm getting all the stuff ready together, in the weekend before Christmas. My son and his wife and my two grandkids coming up are 11 and 13, and I'm going to teach them how to make tamales this year. And that will be, on the side of their grandfather that they never met. So I'm honoring the memory of Freddie without, actually forgetting him or not talking about him or avoiding him. He's an important part of my life and my heritage and my kids' legacy, even the grandkids that never met him. So I want to be sure and honor that. And my husband's all on board with that. He's not feeling threatened or anyway. So he's a part of helping out, and it'll be fun.
great. That's a wonderful example of kind of holding on to the old and moving forward into the new at the same time. So how about you, Melinda? Talk about how the grief kind of comes back during the holidays.
Well, it's interesting. I feel like I'm grieving two different significant losses, and so I'm going to tackle the divorce first. Actually, I'll handle my father first, and then I'll go to the divorce. Um, my father had been sick, and he actually had a completely flatlined about 3 years ago. And so during that time, I had just really spent a lot of time in prayer and working through that process. And I feel like God was really gracious in allowing me some time with him, 3 more years with him, to grieve whatever the relationship was, recognize it wasn't going to change. And so when he finally passed, yes, it hurts, but I feel like God had already brought me through that journey to prepare me for that, which I'm really grateful for, because in his passing, um, he left Noreen, who is his special partner of 33 years, and two older sisters. And none of them are handling it well. Everybody's handling it in a different way. And so it's been really interesting to be on this journey. And there are times when it does hit, usually when I'm helping Noreen with something, or when I'm there, still working through his estate plan with her, something will come up. And there are just moments when it'll just hit. I'll remember something. He had a little phrase that he said, a smile goes many miles. So when little things like that, little quips come up, or he traveled all over. So when I see people traveling or those kind of things, by God's grace, I feel like I dealt with the angst and the hurt before he passed. So at this point, I miss him, but it doesn't grieve me to the same level that I think that it grieves my sisters or Noreen. So, but it was really insightful. Thanksgiving was just a couple of weeks ago. And I was down visiting Maureen, and it hit. We were there, and she was telling me about an invitation that she had received from a family member, and she just started crying. And I just thought, wow, that's when it hit me, and I realized this is her last significant person in her life. And unfortunately, she's in Southern California, and I live in the northern area, right in Central Valley. And so, although I invited her to come with me, she's not in a place to travel or anything. But I just noticed a huge difference, and so I'm recognizing that I need to be more sensitive to what that means for her to be alone. And in many ways, she's also lost the family that she thought that she had in that process. So to be, in your 80s and be the last kind of person standing and be by yourself. I'm working on being really sensitive to what that means for her. And in some ways, it kind of throws me back to the divorce. So this is the third year that I will be having Christmas without the ex. We had been separated for 2 years before that. And the first year was really, really hard. I had been intentional about building traditions with my kids from the time they were little. In the last year that we were together, there was such angst driven from him that it got to the point where even the kids were like, I don't want to have anybody over. I don't want to do anything. It's too much work. And it hurt. It really grieved me to hear that. And it was like, okay, well, I can't battle the kids. So the first year that we were separated, the kids were with me for part of the day, and it was difficult to wrangle them into that. But on Christmas Day, they weren't. And that's when the loneliness really hit.
Sure.
And I'm really grateful that it had been recommended that I go through divorce care, and I did. And they had a special thing on grieving during the holidays. And even with all that knowledge in here, it was still difficult to work through that. And so, but I saw growth the second year. And that is, I recognized what they shared about, grieve, give yourself some time to grieve the past, the yucky stuff, but also embrace the good stuff and look for new traditions. And so the part that was interesting was the second year, holidays started coming around, and my kids decided that they actually really wanted the traditions that I had started with them. And so when I stopped pushing it and I just accepted, okay, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. Of course, it hurts my heart, but if that's what you want. So the interesting part is this year for Thanksgiving, they stayed with me the whole time. And even last year for Christmas, for our second year, my son that's in the military showed up and actually came to spend some time with us as well. So I'm seeing that the traditions, the good part of the traditions are being honored and moving forward. And so this year, it's just very different. My kids are initiating. They wanted to do different things. There's a lot more peace. I do not miss the contention. It's so, yes, I miss my father, but in terms of the divorce, there's a huge weight lifted. And the other blessing in the whole process is the divorce was final, but I had two sons get married this year. I have a grandchild. And
cool.
so even though I'm grieving a marriage that I'd hoped and planned to always be there, I'm now at a place, thank you, Barbara, for helping me go through that process and realize that that was not healthy, that was not productive, that is not God honoring. And so as a result of that, I'm able to actually enjoy and embrace the good stuff that's happening. So that part is really good. So some new traditions, letting go of some old things, recognizing the yuck, but not dwelling on that, focusing on the great opportunities. Honestly, the other night, one of our traditions was every year during Advent, or every Sunday during Advent, we would do two different things. We would go and look at Christmas lights in different parts of the greater Sacramento area. And then we would also go and visit live nativities. And so the interesting part was a couple of nights ago, my daughter, my youngest, was driving around, and she was driving home from some event. And she took a detour and started driving through the cul-de-sac and through the neighborhood just to look at the Christmas lights. And she didn't say anything to me about it. She just did it. And it just warmed my heart of just recognizing, wow, this means something to my kids, And so that's the part where I can focus on the grief of the yuck that had happened. And I had to go through that process and allow my kids to grieve and work through things. But now I'm in a different level of just celebrating the tiniest little victories like that, of just saying, hey, let's go. I actually, just before we started the podcast, I had sent a link to my kids about the live nativities coming up. And while we're doing this recording, one of my sons is reaching out and saying, when did you want to go? And so the fact that my kids are responding that way, and that's the one that has a son. So just the growth and the new opportunity to see that joy start, and encouraging my sons and their wives to start their own new traditions. So it can be hurtful. I don't know. I'm sure different things are going to pop up at different times. To be honest with you, I think one of the most shocking parts for me was attending my son and daughter-in-law's wedding. That I believe that weddings and anniversaries and birthdays, we call them private holidays in our home. And so I was actually more stunned by the grief, the waves of grief that hit me during that, I think, than the actual holiday seasons.
Yeah, I found that to be true sometimes too, when I'm like doing something cool with my granddaughters. And I think about how much my husband would have enjoyed my granddaughters and how much they would have enjoyed him. It really hits me what a tragedy is for them not to have known him and not to get to hang out with such a cool grandpa. So those are the
Melinda, I had the same
lines.
experience when my son got married. Just like you, just like, oh, it's just me instead of us. And, that made me really, really sad. I think sometimes we just don't know when those triggers are going to hit us, even at really happy times.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
Harry, talk a little bit about traditions, old traditions, establishing new traditions. What are the new, like this year you are going to be alone on Christmas. That's more like an accidental occurrence than a plan. But what are some things you have done to help redeem the holidays?
Well, my oldest boy and we talk a lot, normally anyway, but during the different seasons, we like to tell the stories of old, the craziness, the alcoholic in-laws, their insanity, his brother, my son, the antics. And I think by telling those stories, it keeps them alive in your mind, and you focus more on the fun part of the time. And there are times where I talk to him. Something will happen, and I'll go, hey, whether he hears me or not, I believe he does. And one of the things I try to do when I go to a Costco, I see a lot of very unhappy people. They're miserable. And I make it a chore to have fun when I'm there. So I'll say to somebody, I go, you have such a pretty smile. Why don't you smile more often? And they just kind of smile and change, or then I'll tease with an employee. I'll say, do they know you work here? Because you're working awful hard. I don't think they know you work here. And it opens up a dialogue, and all of a sudden people are out of their funk and they're more real. And you can talk about different things, and the fact that you appreciate somebody else, you notice somebody else what they're doing, and you thank them for the product or the service, what have you. I find that helps me not think about the bad stuff, trying to get out of me. And where we live, Highway 49 goes through the town of Auburn, and there's areas where there's sidewalks and there's no sidewalks. And God has a funny way of getting your attention. And I know we've all seen this person in the electric wheelchair, and they're kind of to one side, all hobbled up, and they have the dune buggy flag with the orange thing at the top, and they're driving down the sidewalk or the street, and I see that, and I immediately go, I have no problems. I have no problems. I get to feed myself, change myself, wash myself, and all the rest of it. And that's when I have to remember that I'm more blessed by what is currently in my life than what used to be in my life, and to be more in the present. And that helps me when I see that, to not complain, about, geez, we haven't done this with the house. Well, we have a house. We don't have a tent, and things like that. It might be a difficult thing sometimes more than others, but it's not as bad as it used to be. And a lot of that came from, and I'm not trying to sell Barbara, but I have to give credit where credit is due. And I had a father that he died in front of me at 10 years old. And the very last thing I remember him saying to me 2 days before he died, he was upset with me, backhanded me, knocked me out of a dining room chair. And then he said to me, "Why do you always get between your mother and I?" Well, I had no idea what he was talking about. So he died in front of me, had a massive heart attack in the front yard, gone. And then a few years later, as I'm still trying to navigate, my grandmother and I got into it one day, being a 14-year-old smart mouth, teenager. And her silver bullet was, well, your father never really wanted you anyway. So that was a shot right in the heart and carried a lot of pain and misery in my life. And Barbara did something, and she's about an hour away from where I live. And she did her therapy on me to where older Harry was now talking to younger Harry. And I had a whole hour to go home on the road and process that. And by the time I got home, I felt remarkably different. And a chapter of my life that was horrible was closed. It was absolutely closed, put away. And whenever I have those weird feelings where I just go right back to older Harry's talking to younger Harry and it goes away. So thank you so much for that training and therapy, Barbara. It was miraculous.
You're welcome.
And that helps at this time of year. It does.
It does.
It really does.
So, everyone has talked about things that people have done to help you or things that you've done to help other people. I'd like to touch on that a little bit because it's a big deal. And right after my husband died, Judy Ann drove all the way from, practically Rockland to South Sacramento, where I was at my son's house, just to give me a primer on being a widow. Like, here's what to expect. And so everything she said was so helpful. I have used it. I have remembered it. I have quoted it, offered it to other people. That was a big deal. It was very far. It was inconvenient. I was babysitting my granddaughter, and she just hiked it all the way over there to say, here's the wisdom I have. Let me share it with you. And I really appreciated it. My brother and his family, the first Christmas after my husband died, took us all to San Diego. So I wouldn't be in town. And we got back Christmas Eve and they spent the night and did Christmas with me and handed me off to my son. And there's just been a lot of people that have spoken into my life and acted into my life. This year, I had my gallbladder removed in October and I was just too tired. I couldn't get back up to speed. So I mentioned to my youngest son, I just don't think I'm going to have time to decorate my front yard. And I usually start the 1st of October putting everything up, and then Thanksgiving, I flip the switch and it lights up. And I wasn't going to do any of that. I'm currently in Florida on vacation and I just had too much going on. Well, last Thursday he called and said, I'm coming to town for an ugly sweater party. I'm going to come and put up your front yard lights for you because I know you love those. So those are things that is a new thing. And I'd love to invite you guys to talk about people that have both spoken and acted into your grief in a way that's made it better. And if you have ways that you do something specifically to help people with their grief, I'd love to hear those. So how about you, Julianne?
That was a sweet time for me coming to visit you, Barb. So thank you for validating that. I was thinking about how people are all very different. And some people are grieving at Christmas, and for other people, it's just a hard time. We know as therapists, after Christmas is one of the worst times that people have, just thinking back on the holidays and processing that. I was thinking that one of the things that Jesus said was the Bible talks about Jesus as being a man of sorrows and that he was well acquainted with grief. And so it lets me know that he gets me when I'm hurting, when I'm feeling lonely, when I'm feeling rejected, forgotten, taking things personally, when I'm just mourning, grieving, and I think he gets me. And so I really encourage people to sometimes, when you feel like you're not in a good place and you don't know how to get out of that place, just to take a few minutes and do a little bit of journaling or writing to Jesus about how you feel. Just kind of letting him know, I just, right now life sucks and I just feel like nobody is paying me any attention. Everybody's with somebody else right now, and or their kids are all blah blah blah, whatever, comparing, which never works anyway, because we really can't see what their life is like. But I think, just to take that time and just tell Jesus about how we feel, just to write out, I don't know why you did that. I'm going to protest. The Bible calls it lamenting, and just to lament, this is not the way I dreamed my life was going to be. I wanted my parents to be there for my grandkids as they got older, because they were such amazing grandparents, and, they weren't. But I think acknowledging the hurt and the loss, and when it feels really difficult, taking it to Jesus, because I believe he hears, he sees our pain. He's the Rapha healer. And then he uses people in our life also. Maybe someone will come to your mind while you're doing that you need to contact. One of the things that I like to do during the holidays, and maybe other times as well, is I kind of take an inventory of people who are single, because of my own loss with being a widow. And I try in my own church to, at some time, invite a widow over to my house. And then my husband and I have been sometimes inviting like 3 or 4 over at a time, 4 widows, and we'll have lunch together, and then we'll play cards together. And it's a nice time, because a lot of times widows get left out. They're not a couple, or a divorced person. I'd imagine Melinda's the same way. So we've kind of made an effort to invite them over and have a little time with them. As is coming into the holidays, I have a list of women, especially, and a couple men, who are alone. And so we're getting together a little group to go Christmas caroling. And so we're going to go take a little bag of cookies and go over and Christmas carol. And I think just to let them know, you're not forgotten. We see you. God cares about you. We care about you. And so we're going to be doing that next Wednesday. I'm really looking forward to that. And I think, Carrie, you made such an excellent point that when we're sad and grieving, depressed, we can be very self-absorbed. And so it's so helpful to look around in a store or your neighborhood or in your family for people who can use encouragement. And as we get our eyes off of ourselves and put it on other people, it just makes us feel better.
Absolutely. So, Melinda, talk about people that have spoken or acted into your life, or ways that you like to speak or act into people's lives now that you understand grief in a new way.
I do. It's really interesting. When I was just before I separated from my ex, my closest friend, her husband actually passed unexpectedly from COVID. And so it's been really interesting that she had the death of her husband, and they had a very, very close relationship. And I had the death of my marriage at the same time. So they're different things, but we've kind of cycled through the grief differently. And I'm really grateful for that. I can't imagine. I mean, even just as she's talking about her marriage and grieving her process, it's so foreign from what my experience was. But there's still space to grieve. There's space to just be honest with one another. in that process. I'm super grateful for her. There are several other people. There are great godly men that have spoken into my life during the process, which I believe that God really helped with that healing in that as well. And it kind of goes back to different traditions. There are traditions that we started in our family from the time my kids were little of inviting, we have some great friends that immigrated from another country, and they have celebrated holidays with us for probably 10 plus years, probably more than that. And my best friend and her son would come and celebrate holidays. Even when her husband was alive, he wouldn't necessarily come. So to keep those traditions going is really helpful. I'm definitely much more aware of Noreen and trying to speak into her life in that manner. And also just recognizing it was interesting. I was talking to my good friend yesterday and sharing about a situation, a conversation that I had with one of my kids. And she pointed out, she said, you know, Melinda, I wonder if that's actually an invitation from your child to have you recognize their grieving in their process. And so I feel like that I was grateful that she called that out. And I think that's definitely an area that I need to be more intentional of. I'm aware of certain things, but my grieving process is different. My grieving journey is different. What I know, what I experienced, the time that I put into it, the counseling that I've done, the prayer, all the work that I have done. Um, some of my kids are just beginning that, some still haven't even gotten there yet. And so just recognizing what that looks like and being able to share some things, even with Noreen, encouraging her to, hey, you know, um, that she's heard me speak very openly about some of my conversations with Barbara when I'm in my counseling sessions. And she actually reached out and spoke to a counselor and was like, oh, that's a good thing. So just providing those opportunities to be safe. There's another gal who her husband her divorce was finished, I think about a year before mine. But she has younger children. And so that grieving process, and I remember she sent me a text recently. It was just before Thanksgiving and was like, hey, what am I going to do for Thanksgiving? And she was really upset. And I was like, you're coming here. There's, and she thought I was joking. I was like, you, no, you're coming. I'm going to come and get you. And so the day before I was like, okay, I'm going to come pick you up this time. And she's like, oh, I already figured something out with, you know, my mom and my sister or whatever. But just, I agree wholeheartedly, Julianne. It's just being intentional. I think when God allows us the opportunity, when we seize that opportunity to love and serve and reach out to other people, absolutely, it takes the focus off of ourselves and helps build that compassion, that empathy, which it's amazing how God designs that for our own healing process.
Absolutely. Hey, Harry, did you have anything to add about people that have spoken into your life or acted into your life around your grief? And
Oh yeah. Oh, I have a perfect example of one. Um, and she lives in the house. She is Miss Christmas. I mean, you can't stay bah humbug. There's no way. As much as I try, and I don't really try, but she said to me the other day, she goes, you hate Christmas." I go, "No, I don't hate Christmas." I said, "I love Christmas." I said, "You got to remember, at 12 years old, I was dedicating to have to put Christmas lights up on our house. I hated doing that. I was scared to death. I was going to electrocute myself." I said, and you asked me, can you, meaning me, can you help me put the Christmas lights up?" I go, "Yeah, this is great." And she's baking all the time. And I mean, the house, everywhere I go in the house, there's something Christmas. I have to laugh. Even in the bathroom, she changed the soap dispenser to a globe like a Christmas ornament. And I just go, you know, if you can be bah humbug in this house, I'd like to see you try, and that has been the biggest change in my life, is that every year for all these years we've been together, and she moved in with me in 2010. Christmas is a huge event, and her mother passed away uh, unexpectedly, and I thought for sure that was going to knock her out. Nope. No, she went to 2.0 Christmas. And that's how she's handling her situation. And of course, that bleeds off to me. So, eh, going from my mother and grandmother thought it was funny to wrap up presents that had rocks in them with money in them. You know, well, we didn't know what to get you, so here are these boxes of rocks, and then here's Christy who thinks of the most remarkable things that you truly need, which tells me how much she pays attention to me and cares about me and invests in trying to make me happy in spite of all the weirdness that I've gone through. So I really don't have to look outside of my own four walls. I've got the cheerleader right here. And sometimes it's hard to remember that because you've been so far down on the downside that you start to focus on that, and that takes you away from the present. And so watching her, do all the things that she does and worried about all the things she does about Christmas and what have you, it's going to be weird not having her here during Christmas. I know we'll talk and text and all that stuff, but it's just like, wow, But
Wow.
I'm
That's
very, very grateful for it. We both. I was teasing. I forget who it was. I said, but oh, it was Christine today. We had a session with Christine, Barbara, and I said, what's interesting is that Christy and I were shopping in the same place, looking at broken people. I was looking for small, and she was looking for large, and we found each other, and and the road has been since then. And as Christine said at the end of the session today, she said, "I can't believe I'm looking at the same two people. You guys have come so far." So that's help thanks to Barbara and to Christine and other people too, that have helped us get to where we are. And to your point about helping other people, I believe that part of your own recovery comes from helping other people that are in need, and we had gone through. And they're ever so grateful that somebody actually cares enough to say something or be concerned about them and what have you. And that makes you feel good. It makes me feel good anyway. So
Yeah,
that's pretty much what I can contribute to it all, what I'm thinking. So
that's great. Okay. At the end of my videos, I always ask everyone for their 1 minute wisdom, like your elevator speech. If people ignored everything we talked about this whole time and you could just leave them with one important thought that they would remember, what do you want that to be? And so, Julianne, what is your 1 minute wisdom about holidays and grief?
I think my 1 minute would be that everybody hurts. At some time. It might be you this year, it might be your friend next year or the year after that. It might be both of you, but everybody hurts. And so be as kind to people as you can be. Look for people that you can invite over or take a little gift to. Because I think when we show God's love to other people through our kindness, it lets them feel like they're not alone. And when we feel like we're not alone, then that helps lift that sadness and that burden. But everybody's hurting at some time. I mean, we can feel like we're unique, but this is just like our turn. I think about it when you were kids and we got on the swing and we took turns. It's my turn to sit in the swing, your turn to push me, and then let's switch. And this life that we live on earth is pretty hard. And we may have the losses that the four of us have talked about today, but we have other losses coming our way. And then we have other great times coming our way. And let's just take turns pushing each other to a higher place, like on the swing, and encouraging each other when we're in a better place. And then when it's our turn to hurt, let's be sure that we allow other people into our life and be honest and transparent with them. This is not a good day. I really need your support and your help. Let's go get a Starbucks.
Thank you. That's wonderful. All right, Henry, 1 minute wisdom.
Oh, I thought you were going to go to. I thought I was off the hook. I was going to be the last one.
No.
I would say this, and I've heard people recently just say this after they just lost somebody. They said, today, this has been the worst day of my life. And I heard this response the other day to that, when you hear that. Well, if this is truly the worst day of your life, then you have no place to go but up.
That's a good one.
It's over. It's behind you. And the other thing to go along with, just remember, as long as you still talk about them and share stories about them, they're not gone.
That's right.
They're just on another plane, and they probably enjoy the fact that we do talk about them. And somehow, some way, there's a weird feeling that they're still with us. So don't be so down. It will get better because your worst day is already over.
Well, thank you, Harry. All right, Melinda, 1 minute wisdom.
Well, I'm going to piggyback off of Harry a little bit and just in that just what if you shared today actually is my grandpa's birthday, and he passed away several years ago. And so by God's grace, I actually have the dining room table that he gave to my grandmother. And so it's kind of a fun part in terms of being able to invite my kids and my family and the friends over and actually have a little bit of my grandparents with me in that. And the other part is, Harry, you said, yes, you said, when you've hit the bottom, there's no way to go but up. And I just have to say, in this grieving process, as deeply as you grieve, you can experience that incredible joy at the same time. And so just those little sprinkles, I'm grateful that God just sprinkles those little things in to bring joy. And so you don't have to be trapped in that cage anymore. But I think one of the things that I really wanted to hopefully share is, okay, so here's the one wisdom. Sorry, Barb, I'm babbling on. But that is, give yourself the time and space to grieve. Sometimes the space needs to be with someone else that's very trusted. Sometimes it needs to be by yourself.
Yeah.
And give yourself the time to actually look and consider the part that was painful, but also dig for the good part, and relish the traditions that you can handle. And if some things are too difficult or not so great, let go of those and look and embrace for new traditions.
Yeah.
Right.
So my wisdom is, Harry already said, you cannot do this alone. The most deadly thing in the world is a grieving person alone in a room. My oldest son and daughter-in-law make sure on the holidays I have something to do. They're mindful of all the anniversaries and they check in on me, as does my youngest son. But always, if you can extend inclusion to someone who's alone or grieving with these great examples that you guys have given, my daughter-in-law's family has just invited me in like the extra aunt. And I'm just included in stuff, and people check and make sure I have plans for the holidays. And it feels really good, because to me, that was the worst part of bush time, was like, does anyone wake up in the morning and wonder how I am? And so noticing that these people wonder how I am and reach out to me during the holidays and make sure, and I would invite people to give that gift to others, to make sure that, like Judy Ann said, that the widows are included, that people see them, but people understand they're out there and they're not going to reach out probably on their own. And hopefully they'll say yes when you extend your offer, but at least please make that offer. Okay, so thank you so much for taking your time on a Friday night to do this with me. And I'm going to turn off the recording.